I never imagined I'd watch my mother literally faint or see my father's face turn ashen, white like someone had drained all the blood from his body. But that's exactly what happened when our family lawyer read my grandmother's will. One moment they were whispering cruel jokes about the charity case sitting in the corner, me. The next moment they discovered I'd inherited everything, $340 million, the family empire, the estate, all of it. Their perfectly orchestrated world crumbled in an instant. But to understand why my grandmother made the shocking choice, you need to know how they treated me for 26 years. Before I dive into this incredible family upheaval, I'm curious. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. If you've ever felt overlooked or dismissed by your own family, you'll definitely want to stay for the story. Hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of real stories and life-changing moments. Trust me, the expression on my parents' faces when they realized I owned everything was worth every year of being the family disappointment. My name is Sophia Chin, and for 26 years, I've been the black sheep of the prestigious Wellington Chin dynasty. While my life as a veterinarian in a small clinic in Portland might seem perfectly respectable to most people, to my family it was proof of my complete failure to live up to their standards. I still remember my 16th birthday when my mother, Catherine, sighed dramatically while looking at my mud-stained clothes after I'd spent the day volunteering at an animal shelter. "Sophia, darling, when will you outgrow this animal phase? Your brother Marcus was already interning at investment firms at your age." The comparison stung, but I'd grown accustomed to it by then. Marcus, 3 years older than me, was the golden child. Yale Business School graduate, perfect posture, perfect wife, perfect trajectory to inherit the family's real estate and investment empire. Then there was Isabella, my younger sister by 18 months, who somehow managed to surpass me in family hierarchy despite being younger. Isabella has the Wellington business instincts. My father, Richard, would beam, completely ignoring the fact that my sister had been caught embezzling from her college fund to buy designer handbags. But she could discuss market trends and real estate portfolios, and apparently that's all that mattered. The only person who ever truly understood me was my grandmother, Eleanor Wellington. While the rest of the family attended charity auctions and yacht parties, Grandma Ellie would often sneak away to visit my small veterinary practice. "Show me the newest patients, Sunshine," she'd say, using the nickname only she was allowed to use. 2 months before she passed, we had our last real conversation in my clinic. I was treating a stray cat that had been hit by a car when she arrived unannounced. "There's something special about how you care for those who can't speak for themselves," she said, watching me gently bandage the cat's injured leg with genuine interest. "The others see profit margins and property values. You see souls that need healing." I brushed off the compliment, uncomfortable as always with praise. "Fat lot of good that does in the Wellington Chin empire," I muttered. Grandma Ellie's eyes took on that mysterious twinkle they sometimes had. "Don't be so sure, Sunshine. True worth isn't always measured in stock portfolios." If I had known those would be among her last words to me, I might have pressed her on what she meant. Instead, I just offered her tea, and we talked about a new animal rescue program I was hoping to start, a program my parents would later dismiss as playing with pets instead of building a real career. Family gatherings at the Wellington estate in the hills outside Seattle were particularly painful. I'd arrive with my modest gifts, usually homemade treats for their pets, and watch as they were set aside in favor of the expensive electronics, designer accessories, and luxury vacation packages my siblings exchanged. One Christmas, I overheard my mother telling my Aunt Patricia, "Sophia's just different. We've tried everything, but she insists on this veterinary lifestyle." The way she said veterinary made it sound like a contagious disease. Despite everything, I'd made peace with being the family outsider. I had built a life that fulfilled me, treating beloved pets, running vaccination clinics in underserved communities, and maintaining a small but loyal circle of friends who valued me for who I actually was. I didn't need the Wellington Chin approval to be happy. Or at least that's what I told myself on the rainy Wednesday morning when I received the call about Grandma Ellie's passing. I was in the middle of surgery on a German Shepherd who'd swallowed a tennis ball when my phone rang with my mother's number. "Sophia, Her voice was clipped, businesslike. Your grandmother passed away this morning. The funeral is Saturday. Do you try to wear something appropriate? And just like that, she hung up. No, how are you feeling? No acknowledgement that I might be devastated by the loss of the only family member who ever truly supported me. I set down my surgical instruments and stared at the anesthetized dog before me, tears blurring my vision. What I didn't know then was that Grandma Ellie had set in motion events that would turn the entire Wellington hierarchy upside down, with me at the center of the storm. 3 weeks after Grandma Ellie's funeral, where I stood in the back row while my siblings delivered perfectly polished eulogies they hadn't written themselves, I received a formal letter on heavy cream stationery. The return address read Morrison and Associates, Estate Attorneys. Dear Miss Chun, it began. Your presence is requested at the reading of the last will and testament of Eleanor Margaret Wellington, to take place at Wellington Manor on Monday, August 15th at 3 p.m. Your attendance is of particular importance. I read the letter 3 times, trying to understand why my presence would be of particular importance. Before I could puzzle it out, my phone rang. My mother. I see you've received the letter about the will reading, she said, without preamble. You need to attend, of course, but it's just a formality. Morrison insists on having all family members present regardless of relevance. The pause before relevance spoke volumes. I was planning to come, I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. Good. Wear that navy suit I bought you for Marcus's wedding. At least it looks somewhat professional. She hung up before I could respond, a typical Catherine Wellington power move. As I set the phone down, memories of Grandma Ellie flooded back. Not the formal family gatherings, but the private moments we'd shared that no one else knew about. Like my college graduation, when I'd received my veterinary degree. I'd been awarded the Dean's Prize for community service, but my parents had been too busy with a property acquisition to attend. But as I stood nervously by the awards table, a familiar voice spoke behind me. Outstanding achievement, sunshine. You're going to change so many lives. I spun around to find Grandma Ellie studying my diploma with genuine pride. Grandma, I didn't think anyone from the family was coming. And miss my granddaughter's triumph? Not a chance. She squeezed my shoulder. The others are too busy counting money to see the real treasure in this family. Then there was my 25th birthday. While my parents had thrown lavish parties for both Marcus and Isabella, mine was acknowledged with a gift card and a perfunctory phone call. But Grandma Ellie took me to dinner at a quiet, elegant restaurant overlooking Puget Sound. 25 years, she mused, sipping her wine. You know what I've learned in my 82 years, sunshine? True wealth isn't what's in your portfolio. It's knowing who you are and having the courage to live authentically. I nodded, not fully understanding the weight of her words then. And just 6 months ago, when I'd opened my own veterinary clinic after years of saving, I'd looked up from treating a client's injured bird to see Grandma Ellie examining each room methodically, despite the arthritis I knew was causing her pain. My parents had claimed to be too busy with a real estate merger to visit during my opening week. These memories were interrupted by a sudden influx of calls and texts from family members who hadn't voluntarily spoken to me in months. Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, called to catch up in a transparently fake display of affection. Cousins Derek and Camilla both sent eerily similar messages asking if I was attending the will reading and offering to help me understand anything I might find confusing. Their sudden interest was suspicious, but I tried not to read too much into it. Perhaps Grandma Ellie's death had made them reflect on family connections. Even as I thought it, I knew better. The morning of the will reading dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to my turbulent emotions. I stood before my closet, bypassing the navy suit my mother had commanded me to wear. Instead, I chose a simple black dress with a colorful scarf, one of the few gifts Grandma Ellie had given me that my mother hadn't criticized. Small rebellion, perhaps, but it felt important to present myself authentically. The 2-hour drive to the Wellington estate gave me too much time to think. I remembered holiday dinners where I'd been seated at the children's table until I was 21, business discussions that deliberately excluded me, and the constant grinding message that I wasn't enough, wasn't smart enough, ambitious enough, Wellington enough. The Wellington Manor loomed ahead, a sprawling Tudor-style mansion set among meticulously landscaped gardens. As I pulled into the circular driveway, I noted the collection of luxury vehicles already parked. Marcus's BMW, Isabella's Mercedes, my parents' matching Autos, and Patricia's Range Rover. My modest Honda looked decidedly out of place, much like its owner. The moment I entered the grand foyer, the whispers began. Relatives clustered in small groups, conversations pausing as they noticed me. My cousin Derek's wife, Natalie, actually did a double take as though surprised I'd been invited. Sophia, my father's voice cut through the murmurs. Richard Chin stood tall and imposing in his bespoke suit, silver hair perfectly styled. I'm surprised you bothered to come. This is mainly for the active members of the family business. I met his gaze steadily. The letter said my presence was particularly important. He scoffed. A standard legal phrase. Morrison is nothing if not thorough. With that dismissal, he turned away to join a conversation with Marcus and Derek about quarterly projections. I stood alone in the entrance hall, the outsider as always. What I didn't know was how dramatically my position in the family was about to change. The Wellington Manor Library was a magnificent room, 2 stories tall with wall-to-wall bookshelves and a massive stone fireplace. Leather-bound volumes lined the walls, many for show I suspected, since I'd rarely seen any family member actually reading. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. Family members filed in, automatically arranging themselves in what I recognized as their perceived order of importance. My parents took the large leather chairs directly facing the ornate desk where James Morrison would conduct the reading. Marcus and his wife Victoria claimed the plush love seat to the right, while Isabella and her fiancé, Trevor, settled into armchairs nearby. Isabella looked immaculate as always, in a designer suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my salary. Her blonde hair was swept into a perfect chignon, not a strand out of place. As I entered, her eyes flicked over me, registering my modest dress and handmade scarf. "Oh, Sophia," she said, voice dripping with false concern. "You could have called if you needed help finding something appropriate to wear. I have several designer pieces I've barely worn." Before I could respond, Marcus cut in. "Let it go, Izzy. Not everyone prioritizes appearances." Then, without acknowledging me directly, he returned to his whispered conversation with Victoria, who was surreptitiously checking her phone for what I assumed would be tasteless social media posts about the will reading. The extended family filled in the remaining seating. Aunt Patricia and her husband James, cousins Derek and Camilla with their respective spouses, a few distant relatives who appeared at family events just often enough to maintain their standing. I found myself directed to a straight-back chair in the far corner, partially hidden behind a potted fern. Fitting. Precisely at 3 p.m., James Morrison entered. He was a distinguished man in his 70s with salt and pepper hair and the measured movements of someone who chose his actions carefully. He'd been the Wellington family attorney for decades, though I'd only met him a handful of times. "Good afternoon," he began, arranging papers on the desk. "We are gathered today to execute the last will and testament of Eleanor Margaret Wellington. Before I begin, I want to express my personal condolences to the family. Eleanor was not only my client, but a dear friend." A murmur of appropriate responses rippled through the room. I noticed my mother dabbing at completely dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Morrison began with formalities, then moved to the initial bequests. To Catherine, my mother, went the family jewelry collection, including pieces dating back to the 1890s. My father received Grandma Ellie's art collection, 17 pieces worth millions. Marcus and Victoria were given the vacation property in the San Juan Islands, while Isabella received ownership of a smaller, but still valuable condo in downtown Seattle. Various extended family members received modest financial gifts, $75,000 here, $150,000 there. Significant sums to normal people, but small change in Wellington terms, though enough to keep the distant relatives feeling valued. As each bequest was announced, I noticed a pattern forming. The recipients would nod graciously, but their eyes remained tense, calculating. The major assets, the primary estate where we now sat, the family business Wellington Properties, and the substantial investment portfolio, remained unmentioned. The tension in the room grew palpable. My mother's perfectly manicured nails tapped an impatient rhythm on the leather armrest. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Isabella maintained her composed facade, but I could see the tightness around her eyes. Now, regarding the primary residence, Wellington Properties, and the consolidated investment portfolio, Morrison continued, adjusting his glasses. The room went completely still. Even Victoria had put down her phone. Then came the moment that would replay in my mind for months to come. My mother, apparently believing herself to be speaking quietly to my father but projecting more than she realized, leaned over and whispered, "I don't know why the charity case is even here." Several relatives tittered nervously. My face burned with humiliation, but I kept my expression neutral, a skill honed through years of similar jabs. I caught Morrison's eye, and something in his expression made me sit up straighter. He looked directly at me with what almost seemed like anticipation. As the whisper subsided, Morrison cleared his throat and prepared to continue. "The remainder of the estate," Morrison announced, his voice taking on a formal tone, "including Wellington Manor, controlling interest in Wellington Properties, and the primary investment portfolio valued at approximately $340 million, I hereby bequeath to my granddaughter, Sophia Chen." The silence that followed was absolute, as if every molecule of air had been sucked from the room. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. No one breathed. Then chaos erupted. My mother's face drained of color so rapidly I thought she might be having a stroke. Her hand clutched at her throat before she literally collapsed back into her chair, the carefully crafted Catherine Wellington composure shattering completely. My father stood up so violently his chair toppled backward. "This is preposterous," he shouted, face flushing dark red. "There's been a mistake. A clerical error." Marcus sat frozen, his mouth opening and closing without sound like a designer-clad fish out of water. Victoria, always quick to calculate financial implications, was already pulling out her phone, presumably to call her lawyer. Isabella's reaction was the most physically dramatic. She jumped to her feet, knocking over a priceless antique lamp in the process. The crash barely registered amid the growing cacophony of voices. "This can't be legal. She knows nothing about business." Eleanor wasn't in her right mind. The accusations flew from all corners of the room. Through it all, I sat perfectly still, feeling strangely detached, as if watching the scene unfold in a movie rather than living it. Morrison raised his hands for silence. When that failed, he used a small brass bell from the desk to cut through the noise. "Ladies and gentlemen, please. There's more." Gradually the room quieted, though the tension remained electric. Morrison turned to a laptop on the desk and pressed a key. The large television screen on the wall flickered to life, and suddenly there was Grandma Ellie. She looked tired but completely lucid, seated in this very library. My throat tightened at the sight of her. "If you're watching this," she began, "then I've moved on, and James has just informed you of my decision regarding my estate." I imagine the room is in something of an uproar. Her eyes twinkled with that familiar mischief. "Before you begin contacting your attorneys, allow me to explain." She shifted in her seat, leaning forward. "For the past 12 years, I have been conducting an ongoing evaluation of each member of this family. Not of your business acumen or your social connections, but of your character, your humanity." The tests were simple but revealing. Grandma Ellie detailed examples that made the room grow uncomfortably still. How my father had refused to provide health insurance to long-term employees to improve quarterly profits. How my mother had deliberately undermined a charity auction to make a rival organization look bad. How Marcus had knowingly sold defective properties to first-time homebuyers. How Isabella had falsified inspection reports to expedite sales. Each of you demonstrated, time and again, that you value profit over people, status over compassion, appearance over substance. Her voice grew sad. Each of you failed the tests I set before you. Not business tests, but human ones. Then her expression softened. Except Sophia. I felt every eye in the room turn to me. My sunshine, who used her modest veterinary salary to provide free medical care for shelter animals. Who spends her weekends at low-income housing complexes providing pet care for families who can't afford it. Who has never, not once, asked me for money or advantages, despite being systematically excluded from family opportunities. Tears blurred my vision as Grandma, Ellie continued. Sophia doesn't just understand the value of $1. She understands the value of a life. Every life, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. That is the leader I want for the Wellington legacy. She leaned back in her chair. I've left detailed records of my observations over the years. James has copies of everything. Should any of you contest this will, those records, including some rather unflattering business practices I've documented, will become part of the public record. The video ended with Grandma Ellie looking directly into the camera. Sophia, my dear girl, I've left you a personal letter. The rest of you, I hope this serves as a wake-up call. It's not too late to become the people I always hoped you would be. The screen went dark, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. Morrison broke the spell by approaching me with an envelope. This is for you, from Eleanor. As I reached for it with trembling hands, Isabella suddenly found her voice. You manipulated her, she shrieked, pointing an accusing finger at me. You scheming little nobody. All these years, pretending to be so pure and noble. It was all an act to get your hands on her money. And just like that, the tenuous control in the room snapped completely. The library descended into absolute chaos. Multiple family members were shouting simultaneously, creating a wall of noise that made individual accusations hard to distinguish. My father had moved to stand directly in front of Morrison, his face inches from the attorneys. Fix this mistake immediately, he demanded, jabbing a finger into Morrison's chest. Eleanor was clearly not of sound mind. We'll have medical experts testify. I assure you, Mr. Chin, Morrison replied calmly. Eleanor underwent comprehensive cognitive assessments prior to finalizing this will. The documentation is impeccable. My mother had recovered from her initial shock and was now advancing toward me, her perfectly highlighted hair slightly askew, a small but telling sign of her internal disarray. What did you do? She hissed. What kind of trickery did you use on a vulnerable old woman? Your own grandmother? Before I could respond, Marcus stepped between us, his handsome face contorted with anger. I'm calling our lawyers right now. You'll be tied up in court for years. You'll never see a penny of this money. You pathetic. I strongly advise against that course of action, Morrison interrupted, raising his voice to be heard above the din. There are additional stipulations I haven't yet read. The room gradually quieted, everyone too concerned about their financial interests to risk missing crucial information. Morrison adjusted his glasses and continued reading. Any contest of this will by any named beneficiary will result in that person's complete disinheritance. Furthermore, Sophia Chen has immediate and irrevocable control of all assets as of the reading of this document. He paused to let that sink in, then delivered the final blow. Family members currently residing in or utilizing any Wellington-owned properties must vacate within 30 days, unless Miss Chen explicitly permits otherwise. The implications hit like a tidal wave. My parents' primary residence, this very estate, was technically a Wellington property. So was Marcus's downtown office, Isabella's Seattle condo, the vacation homes, the company cars. This is outrageous, my Aunt Patricia exclaimed. You can't possibly expect us to. I never asked for this, I said, finding my voice at last. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me. I had no idea what Grandma Ellie was planning. This is as much a shock to me as it is to all of you. Oh, please, Patricia scoffed. You've obviously been planning this for years. The sweet granddaughter act, the modest lifestyle to gain her sympathy, it was all calculated. Derek, always quick to sense which way the wind was blowing, sidled up to me with a sudden fraternal smile. Cousin Sophia, perhaps we could speak privately? I'm sure we can work something out that benefits everyone. Morrison intervened, placing a protective hand on my shoulder. Miss Chin will need time to review all documents and consider her position. I suggest we adjourn for today. He began guiding me toward a private study adjacent to the library, but my parents followed, unwilling to let their golden ticket out of their sight. After everything we've done for you, my mother cried, her carefully maintained composure crumbling further. Done for me? I repeated incredulously. What exactly have you done for me except make me feel worthless my entire life? You cannot possibly manage this responsibility, my father insisted, his business voice slipping into place. You have no experience, no training, no. Actually, Morrison interjected, Eleanor has been preparing Sophia for this role for quite some time. All three of us stared at him. The veterinary conferences abroad, the animal welfare symposiums. Eleanor used those occasions to introduce Sophia to key business contacts and evaluate her natural aptitude. She also enrolled her in discrete business education programs under an alias, which she completed with distinction. I blinked in shock. Those weekend workshops Grandma Ellie had recommended to help with the business side of your practice had actually been high-level management training. She's been receiving tailored business education for 4 years, Morrison continued. Eleanor was quite thorough in her planning. The look of stunned betrayal on my parents' faces might have been satisfying under different circumstances. As it was, I felt only a profound exhaustion. I need to go, I said quietly. Morrison nodded. Take Eleanor's letter. Review it in private. We'll speak tomorrow about next steps. Somehow I made it past the remaining family members, their accusations and pleas following me down the hallway like persistent ghosts. I clutched Grandma Ellie's letter to my chest, protecting it from grasping hands and prying eyes. Outside, the summer air felt thick and unbreathable. I collapsed into the driver's seat of my Honda, hands shaking so badly I couldn't insert the key into the ignition. Through the windshield, I could see figures gesticulating wildly through the windows of the mansion. My mansion now, apparently. I stared down at the envelope in my lap, my name written in Grandma Ellie's distinctive handwriting. Whatever explanation lay within, I wasn't ready to face it yet. Not here, with the weight of the Wellington estate looming over me like a thundercloud. I finally managed to start the car and drive away, leaving behind a family in disarray and a fortune I'd never wanted. 1 week after the will reading, my modest apartment had become command central for what felt like psychological warfare. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from family members employing every manipulation tactic imaginable. My mother had left 19 voicemails, each one a masterclass in emotional blackmail. Sophia, darling, her latest message began, her voice tremulous with calculated vulnerability. Family must stand together in times of crisis. Your grandmother obviously meant for you to share this burden with those who understand the Wellington legacy. The message ended with artful sniffling. My father preferred email, his messages oscillating between thinly veiled threats and condescending offers of guidance. His most recent, the board meeting on Thursday, will determine Q4 strategy. Your absence will be interpreted as abdication of responsibility. I can attend as your proxy to prevent irreparable damage to the company. Isabella's approach was perhaps the most transparent. After her initial outburst, she'd pivoted to saccharin's sisterly concern. Sophia, I can't imagine how overwhelming this must be for you, she texted. Let me help shoulder some of this burden. I can take over the property management division while you find your footing. Marcus remained true to form, unable to maintain a consistent strategy. His messages alternated between threatening legal action and attempting to establish brotherly camaraderie. Remember how I helped you with your science fair project in 8th grade? Good times. Speaking of projects, let's discuss the Seattle development situation. I'd barely slept, barely eaten. The letter from Grandma Ellie remained unopened on my kitchen table, simultaneously a beacon and a burden. I wasn't ready to read her final words to me, not when I was still processing the earthquake she'd set off in my life. On the 8th day, I finally broke the seal. My dearest sunshine, it began in Grandma Ellie's familiar handwriting. If you're reading this, then James has executed my wishes, and you're likely feeling ambushed, overwhelmed, and perhaps even angry with me. You have every right to those feelings. The burden I've placed on your shoulders is enormous, and I did so without your knowledge or consent. For that, I apologize. But I did not choose you on a whim or out of spite toward the others. I've been watching all of you for years, testing, evaluating, hoping I was wrong about what the wealth and status had done to our family. I wasn't wrong, sadly. The others failed every test of character I set before them. Not business tests. Anyone can learn business. They failed human tests, compassion tests, integrity tests. You, my dear girl, passed everyone without even knowing you were being tested. You have something that cannot be taught or bought, a moral compass that never wavers, even when the path is difficult. I've left you my personal journal in the wall safe behind the portrait in my study. The combination is your birthday. That journal details everything, every test, every failure, every observation that led to my decision. I know you never wanted this role, but sometimes the best leaders are those who don't seek power. Wellington Properties employs hundreds of people whose livelihoods depend on ethical leadership. The foundation supports causes that change lives. This legacy can do tremendous good in the right hands, your hands. I've arranged for James to guide you, and I've identified several trusted advisors who can help ease your transition. But ultimately, Sophia, I trust your judgment above all others. All my love, always. Grandma Ellie. P.S. Remember what I told you on your 25th birthday. True wealth isn't what's in your portfolio. It's knowing who you are and having the courage to live authentically. Never apologize for who you are, sunshine. Not to any of them. I set the letter down, tears streaming down my face. Later that day, I called Morrison and arranged to visit the estate, my estate, to retrieve Grandma Ellie's journal. The leather-bound volume I found in the safe was thick, with additional pages tucked between entries. As I began reading, patterns emerged in Grandma Ellie's elegant handwriting. Detailed accounts of tests she had set up over the years to evaluate family members' character. My mother, Catherine, had refused to help Grandma Ellie's longtime housekeeper, Maria, when Maria's grandson needed expensive medical treatment. I offered to connect Maria with resources, my mother had apparently said, but we can't set a precedent of handouts to staff. What the journal revealed, and what my mother didn't know, was that Grandma Ellie had deliberately mentioned Maria's situation at a family dinner to see how Catherine would respond. My father, Richard, had been secretly inflating property values on insurance claims to increase payouts. Grandma had known but allowed it to continue as part of her evaluation, documenting every instance. Marcus had been caught on hidden cameras berating construction workers when he thought no one important was watching. Isabella had deliberately provided false information to a competing real estate agent to sabotage a deal, then swooped in to claim the commission herself. And interspersed throughout were observations about me. Small kindnesses Grandma had witnessed, integrity shown when I thought no one was looking. Sophia spent her lunch break today helping an elderly client whose cat was hit by a car. She didn't charge for the emergency treatment and even drove the woman home afterward. She didn't recognize her as Eleanor Winters, potential Wellington Properties investor. The journal was damning, comprehensive, and utterly irrefutable. As I closed the journal, my phone rang. It was Morrison. Sophia, I hope I'm not interrupting, but there's a situation developing. Your family is planning legal action despite the stipulations in the will. They're claiming undue influence and diminished capacity. I felt a momentary panic rise in my chest. The enormity of what I'd inherited, not just assets, but responsibilities, conflicts, decisions affecting hundreds of lives, crashed down on me. My breath came in short gasps, the room spinning slightly. Sophia, are you all right? Morrison's concerned voice anchored me. I'm having a panic attack, I managed to say between shallow breaths. That's entirely understandable. Listen to me, breathe slowly. You're not alone in this. After I calmed down, Morrison continued, I suggest we arrange a family meeting on your terms, on your territory. It's time to establish boundaries. After hanging up, I called the one person outside the family I trusted implicitly, my best friend from veterinary school, Dr. Sarah Martinez. We'd met during our first year when I was struggling with organic chemistry, and she'd offered to study with me. Unlike many friendships that faded with time and circumstance, ours had endured. "Holy shit, Sophia," she said when I finished explaining everything. "That's like something out of a movie." "I don't know if I can do this, Sarah. I'm a veterinarian, not a CEO." "Bullshit," she replied with typical Sarah directness. "You've been managing a clinic with minimal resources and maximal impact for years. You're organized, intuitive, and you don't take crap from anyone except your family, and that's about to change." Her confidence in me helped, but I still felt adrift. After we hung up, I found myself driving to the cemetery where Grandma Ellie was buried. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured grounds as I sat beside her grave. "I wish you'd warned me," I said to the granite headstone. "I wish you'd given me time to prepare." A gentle breeze rustled the flowers I'd brought. "But I think I understand why you didn't." As the sun began to set, I made my decision. I would arrange a family meeting at the estate, my estate. It was time to address everything once and for all. The grand dining room of Wellington Manor felt different now that I understood it was legally mine. The massive mahogany table that had intimidated me throughout childhood now served as my stage. I'd arranged the seating strategically, myself at the head where Grandma Ellie used to sit, Morrison to my immediate right, and two security professionals discreetly positioned by the doors. I'd spent 3 days preparing, reading Grandma's journal from cover to cover, reviewing company documents, and consulting with Morrison about the legal realities of my new position. I felt calm in a way I hadn't expected, the calm of someone with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The family arrived in waves, clearly having coordinated their entrances for maximum impact. My parents came first, presenting a united front in conservative, expensive attire designed to project authority. My mother's pearl earrings and father's gold watch gleamed in the afternoon light, subtle reminders of generational wealth. "Sophia," my father nodded stiffly. "I trust you've come to your senses since our last meeting." I gestured to their seats halfway down the table, not in their usual positions of honor. The slight widening of my mother's eyes told me the message had been received. Marcus arrived next with Victoria. Her designer business attire was a calculated choice. She'd dressed for a boardroom showdown, her expression professionally pleasant, but ice cold as winter. Isabella and Trevor entered last, Isabella making a show of humility that was transparently fake. Trevor, for once, wasn't checking his phone, likely warned that this meeting was not for social media consumption. Once everyone was seated, an uncomfortable silence fell. They were waiting for me to speak first, to defend myself, to apologize, to offer compromises. Instead, I simply sat, making eye contact with each person at the table. The silence stretched until my father finally broke. "Well, you called this meeting. What do you want?" I placed my hands flat on the table. "I want to address the situation directly. Grandma Ellie left everything to me. That is a legal fact that cannot be changed. How we proceed from here is up to all of us, but primarily to me." "How generous of you to acknowledge our existence," Isabella said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "I've prepared a statement," I continued, ignoring her. "I'd appreciate being allowed to finish before you respond." I unfolded a piece of paper, but didn't look at it. The writing had been an exercise to organize my thoughts, not a script I needed. I never asked for this inheritance. I never expected it. But Grandma Ellie's wishes were clear, and I intend to honor them. Her decision wasn't made lightly or without careful consideration. She spent years evaluating all of us, not as business assets, but as human beings. "That's absurd," my father interrupted. "Eleanor was a businesswoman first and foremost. She would never." "You have no idea who she really was," I said quietly. "None of you do. You saw what you wanted to see, a wealthy matriarch whose success you could leverage for your own gain. I saw a woman with profound integrity who was deeply disappointed in what her family had become." My father's face flushed dark red. "You have no right to lecture us about family. You who rejected everything we tried to give you." "Like what, Dad? The constant reminders that I wasn't good enough? The comparisons to Marcus and Isabella?" The dismissal of my passions and career because they couldn't be monetized to your satisfaction. Before he could respond, I opened Grandma Ellie's journal. Shall I tell you what Grandma really thought of this family? Would you like to hear her actual words? The threat hung in the air. My mother's face had gone pale again. That won't be necessary, Morrison said smoothly. I believe what Sophia is trying to establish is that she has access to extensive documentation that would be damaging if made public during any legal proceedings. Are you threatening us? Marcus demanded. I am stating facts, I replied. Fact 1. I have evidence of Dad's insurance fraud involving the Bellevue properties. My father's jaw went slack. Fact 2. I have documentation of Mom's embezzlement from the Children's Charity Fund. My mother made a small choking sound. Fact 3. I know about Marcus's worker safety violations that resulted in 3 hospitalizations. Fact 4. I have proof of Isabella's real estate fraud involving the downtown condos. The room went deadly silent. I hadn't wanted to start this way, but their hostility had forced my hand. I don't want to use any of this information. I don't want to hurt any of you. But I will not be bullied, manipulated, or threatened out of what Grandma Ellie entrusted to me. How long? My mother asked suddenly, her voice barely audible. How long what? How long have you been planning this with her? How long have you been gathering information against us? I laughed, a genuine, incredulous laugh. That's the part you still don't understand. I didn't plan anything. I didn't gather information. I didn't even know about most of these things until I read her journal. Grandma Ellie observed, documented, and decided. All without my knowledge. My mother's carefully maintained facade finally cracked completely. I don't understand, she whispered, and for the first time in my life, I saw real vulnerability in her eyes. Why you? I was her daughter-in-law for 30 years. Why would she do this to me? The raw pain in her voice caught me off guard. Mom, she didn't do this to hurt you. She did it to protect her legacy from what we've all become. And what exactly have we become? She challenged, tears now flowing freely. People who measure human worth by portfolio size. People who see relationships as transactions. People who've forgotten what actually matters. My mother stared at me, then did something I never expected. She buried her face in her hands and began to sob. Not the theatrical tears she deployed at charity events, but ugly, body-shaking sobs. I was so jealous, she admitted between gasps. She loved you in a way she never loved me. Her own daughter-in-law. And I couldn't understand why. The confession hung in the air, raw and unexpected. My father, uncomfortable with the emotional display, attempted to regain control. This is all very dramatic, but it doesn't change the practical reality. You'll run the company into the ground within a year. You have no experience, no connections, no. Actually, she has me, Morrison interrupted, and the advisory board Eleanor assembled. And whether you choose to accept it or not, she has qualities that cannot be taught in business school: integrity, compassion, and an unerring moral compass. She has me too, Marcus said suddenly, surprising everyone at the table. All eyes turned to him. Look, I'm still angry about all this, he clarified quickly. But I've been thinking about what Grandma said in that video about all the tests we failed without knowing. And she wasn't wrong about me. He looked directly at me. You're going to need someone who knows the day-to-day operations. Someone the employees already trust. Isabella stared at her brother in shock, then at me. Something in her expression shifted, the perfect mask cracking to reveal a glimpse of the insecure woman beneath. He was right about me too, she admitted in a small voice. About all the things I did to get ahead. I thought that's what she wanted. What would make her proud? She wiped away a tear. I've been so awful to you, Sophia, for years. Because I thought she loved you more. And it turns out I was right. She loved all of us, I said gently. She just didn't respect what some of us had become. I looked around the table at my family, really looked at them. Perhaps for the first time, seeing the flawed, complicated people behind the perfect Wellington chin facade. This is Grandma Ellie's final test, I realized aloud. This meeting, how we handle this transition, whether we can put aside ego and greed and find a way forward together. My father began to object, but my mother placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Richard," she said softly, "we never understood her. Or him." She looked at me with something that might have been respect. "Maybe it's time we tried." 3 months after the confrontation in the dining room, I sat in Grandma Ellie's former office at Wellington Properties headquarters. The space had been transformed. The dark, heavy furniture replaced with cleaner lines, the walls now adorned with local artists' work rather than stuffy portraits of stern-faced businesspeople from generations past. Sunlight streamed through windows that had previously been obscured by heavy drapes. The company itself was undergoing similar transformation. My first actions as CEO had raised eyebrows in the business community, but earned immediate loyalty from employees, implementing a company-wide living wage policy, establishing comprehensive healthcare benefits, creating an emergency fund for staff facing unexpected hardships. "The quarterly projections, Miss Chun," said Rebecca, my executive assistant who had previously worked with Grandma Ellie. "Thank you, Rebecca. And please, it's still just Sophia." She smiled, something she rarely did under the previous administration. "The board is quite impressed with the numbers. The ethical business initiative seems to be attracting new investors rather than deterring them, as some predicted." I nodded, reviewing the documents. The Eleanor Wellington Foundation for Animal Welfare had launched last month, channeling significant resources into veterinary care for low-income families, wildlife rehabilitation programs, and research into humane farming practices. My relationship with my family had evolved in unexpected ways. My parents and I maintained minimal contact, civil but distant. They had relocated to the San Juan Islands property, which I had transferred to them as a gesture of goodwill, despite Morrison's reservations. Marcus had surprised everyone by becoming my most steadfast ally. After initial skepticism, he had embraced the company's new direction, particularly our environmental sustainability initiatives. He'd even ended his engagement to Victoria after she attempted to leverage insider company information for her own investment portfolio. Isabella remained the most complicated relationship. Our reconciliation was tentative, marked by occasional setbacks when old patterns resurfaced. But she was trying, attending therapy, acknowledging her past behavior, and slowly building a relationship with me based on who we actually were rather than the roles we'd been assigned. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Morrison entered, carrying a large portfolio. "I thought you'd want to see this immediately," he said, placing it on my desk. "The estate evaluation has been completed. There are several items Eleanor apparently acquired anonymously over the years." I opened the portfolio and gasped. Inside were photographs of works by obscure but brilliant artists, many of whom I'd studied and admired during my art history courses that Grandma Ellie had encouraged me to take. But what truly shocked me was the final section, paintings signed YMW. Eleanor Margaret Wellington. "Grandma was an artist," I whispered. Morrison nodded. "In secret, it seems." These were found in a climate-controlled storage facility. According to the documentation, she began painting seriously in her 50s, but never showed her work publicly. I stared at the images, landscapes, portraits, abstract pieces, showing remarkable talent and sensitivity. I had no idea. "There's something else," Morrison added, handing me a sealed envelope. "This was with the paintings, with instructions to deliver it to you after you'd been in your position for exactly 3 months. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Grandma Ellie's handwriting. "Art and business are not opposites, sunshine. Both require vision, patience, and the courage to create something that didn't exist before. I had to choose one path. You don't. Integration, not separation, is the future. Love, Grandma Ellie." Later that evening, I attended the annual Wellington Foundation Gala, my first as the foundation's director. The event had been reimagined, highlighting local artists and animal welfare programs rather than serving as a showcase for elite wealth. As I circulated among guests, I encountered my parents. My mother had clearly spent hours preparing her appearance, her designer gown and professional makeup a suit of armor against public scrutiny. "Sophia, darling," she said, air kissing near my cheek. "What a lovely event. So creative." The slight pause spoke volumes. I've been telling everyone how proud we are of what you've accomplished. My father nodded stiffly. The company numbers are solid. You've surprised me, I'll admit, though I still believe some of the traditional approaches. Thank you both, I interrupted gently. I appreciate your support. You're welcome to be part of this new chapter of the Wellington legacy, but you need to understand, you'll never control it again. The truth hung between us, acknowledged but not contested. My mother's smile tightened slightly, but she nodded. As they moved away, I caught sight of a painting being installed in the main hall, a piece I'd been working on secretly for months. It was a portrait of Grandma Ellie, but not the stern businesswoman most people remembered. My painting showed her as I had known her, eyes crinkled with laughter, hands slightly paint-stained, radiating the warmth and wisdom that had shaped my life. Beside it hung one of her own works, a landscape I'd discovered among her collection, left unfinished. I had completed it, our brushstrokes merging seamlessly, a collaboration transcending time and death. Standing before these paintings, I felt a profound sense of peace. The Wellington legacy had been entrusted to me not because I was the most business-savvy or the most ambitious, but because I understood what Grandma Ellie had learned too late in her own life, that wealth without compassion is poverty of the worst kind. I had redefined family on my own terms, created boundaries that protected my well-being, built a leadership style that honored both artistic sensitivity and business acumen. The journey ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, but for the first time since that fateful reading, I felt fully capable of meeting them. As I looked around the gala, at the diverse crowd of artists, animal advocates, employees, and even some family members who were genuinely trying to change, I realized that Grandma Ellie's greatest gift hadn't been the money or the company. It had been the courage to see people as they truly are, and the wisdom to know that real legacy isn't built on fear or control, but on love and the belief that people can become better than they are. What's your take on inheritance stories like mine? Have you ever been the underestimated person in your family who finally got their moment of recognition? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story of family drama and unexpected justice resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories that prove sometimes the quiet ones are watching everything. Share this with anyone who needs a reminder that sometimes the people others overlook are the ones who see everything most clearly. Thank you for listening to my journey from charity case to guardian of the Wellington legacy. Until next time.